Chapter 12 of Unit 3. We will still be focusing on abdominal anatomy, only this time we'll work on the circulatory and excretory system. Now we have this big long word here called the reticuloendothelial system. And all this is it's a specific system in our body that has organs that are in different parts of the body, but they have a similar function. And all they're doing is cleaning body fluids. So this includes things like lymph nodes, the liver, the spleen, parts of the bone marrow. Now the spleen is going to be an organ lying in the upper left quadrant. We saw it just a little bit in the last chapter. But let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So here is the spleen here, this kind of purplish looking structure. That will be in the upper left quadrant, so the opposite quadrant of the liver. We also have to talk about the abdominal aorta. The abdominal aorta is just the same vessel as the thoracic aorta, only now the thoracic aorta has passed the diaphragm and is entered into a new region, so we call it something else. And then we call it the abdominal aorta at this point. So after the diaphragm, we call it the abdominal aorta. Again, this is a very large vessel that is this big structure right here going from the diaphragm all the way down here. It's going to split into two branches that we'll discuss here in just a moment, but this is the abdominal aorta. What the abdominal aorta is going to split into are two structures called the common iliac artery, so a right and a left common iliac artery. Again, that word common is telling you it will also split, and each common iliac artery will split into an external iliac artery and an internal iliac artery. Now, the internal iliac artery is going to dive into the pelvic cavity, whereas the external iliac artery is going to continue down, and after it passes the inguinal ligament, which we talked about in Unit 1, it becomes the femoral artery. That is the external iliac artery. So here our abdominal aorta would be about right here. And so we're seeing where it splits. And a lot of times that actually happens right about the belly button. It's going to split into the common iliac arteries here on each side. And as we look at the common iliac arteries, we can see them split into an internal that's going to dive into the pelvis, and then an external iliac artery, which it will continue on to the inguinal ligament, which is right here. Once it passes this inguinal ligament, it becomes the femoral artery. Now we have a whole lot of branches coming off this abdominal aorta. Our first one's called the inferior phrenic arteries. So again, that word phrenic, just telling you it is going to the diaphragm. We also have something called the celiac trunk, and it has three major branches. The first one is the common hepatic artery. This will be going to the right side of the body, so going to the liver. We have left gastric artery, which usually goes upward and goes to the lesser curvature of the stomach. And then we have the splenic artery, and the splenic artery goes to the spleen. So here's our abdominal aorta right after it passes the diaphragm here, and here are the inferior phrenic arteries as they continue upward to the diaphragm, and then this is the celiac trunk right here. And we can see the branches, we'll see them a little bit better here in just a moment. Now in this picture, we see the celiac trunk right here. So this common vessel, and then we see it split into three structures. The first one's splenic artery, which is going all the way out here to the spleen in the upper left quadrant. And a lot of times splenic artery gets really wavy or really curly, just like this, going out to the spleen. Heading upwards, we see the left gastric artery as it continues on to the lesser curvature of the stomach. And then we have the common hepatic artery. It goes out to the liver. And the common hepatic artery is going to split into a whole lot of vessels, and we'll talk about them here in a moment. Now off splenic artery, we have the left gastroomental artery or left gastroepiploic artery. And anytime you see this terminology, gastroomental, when it comes to the blood vessels, or gastroepiploic, you should be thinking it's going to the greater curvature of the stomach. And so continuing on here, following splenic artery, we see this branch coming off here, which is the left gastroomental or left gastroepiploic artery.